Mike, welcome.
Thanks very much, Tracy.
What's a time when you felt completely lost or overwhelmed, and how did you find your way back?
Been away up north running a survival program. I'd landed in Perth. My wife and I had just got news that she had got a call back from a mammogram. Human beings are designed to be in collective, and that's a product of where you grew up and your influences and education and experiences and all of that.
Is there anything that Mike House fears?
Oh, definitely. I actually get very uncomfortable in situations where I feel like I have zero control. That's true for business as well, right?
Yeah.
There will be seasons where we're super successful and other times where it's like, why am I even doing this? So just acknowledging that is possible is a bit liberating, and then it kind of helps us to go, well, okay, so what can I do with this set of circumstances I'm in right now?
Hello and welcome to the Real Biz Life Chronicles, where we discuss all things business, branding, and life from the Horizon Digital podcast recording studio here in Perth. I'm your host, Tracy Fryer, the founder of Design Studio Perth. And to celebrate the launch of Season 2, Design Studio Perth is offering all our listeners and viewers a free brand discovery. So if you're ready to identify where the gaps are in your business and are looking to generate more leads, simply use the link in the show notes below to book in a time to have a chat. Now, I'm going to be relentless and come out and say this, that the Real Biz Life Chronicles is on a mission to simply knock Joe Rogan and Stephen Bartlett off their pedestal and become one of the leading podcasts. But in order to do that, we need your help. So if you do enjoy this episode, we please ask that you like and subscribe to our channels below, or simply share it with a fellow human that you love that potentially needs some inspiration or motivation. Today's guest is someone who has spent decades mastering the art of adaptability, resilience, and high-pressure decision-making. Described by those close to him as wise, thoughtful, and ambitious, he's a sought-after author, speaker, and mentor in adaptive thinking, with a background in survival instructing and organizational change. But here's what makes him truly stand out. His words are gold. The people around him say his insights are always worth listening to, and today you get the chance to hear them firsthand. His expertise goes far beyond survival in the wild. Though he once completed a 12-day solo trek in the Pilbara with just 2 liters of water, he spent years helping leaders and teams spot their blind spots and stay calm under pressure and rethink the way they navigate uncertainty. Beyond business, he's building a 2-seat aircraft, training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu multiple times a week, and embracing the quiet, remote places with his closest family and friends. And if we had a theme song, I'm told that it would be What a Man. Would be a solid pick, because those who know him describe him as generous, insightful, and always willing to help others. He's also a great connector, the kind of person who gives his time, expertise, and wisdom freely, making an impact that often goes unnoticed. Today we're diving into what survival skills teach us about business and life, and when to blaze a new trail versus following a proven path, and how to stay adaptable in a world that never stops changing. One of my guest's quotes that I love is when in business, the bush, or life, there are 3 kinds of situations we face: survival, living, or thriving. All of them require us to be adaptable. So buckle up, because this is going to be one raw, unfiltered, and powerful conversation with no one other than Mike House. Mike, welcome.
Thanks very much, Tracy. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to our chat. I saw that you did a presentation, I think it was a quorum. And I saw the post on LinkedIn afterwards, and I had absolute FOMO that I wasn't there. So I feel very, very privileged to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Mike, take us back. Where did it all start for you?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? How far back do you want to go?
Completely your call.
Yeah, so probably a useful insertion point is the survival stuff. So I spent 20 years as a survival instructor in one of the world's leading arid area survival schools, which was based out of Perth here. And that was just a curious door that opened. I never really had a career trajectory mapped out. And I spent 20 years in there where my job was really helping people to experience duress. So it was like take them out there and then keep the ground moving, keep them disrupted. And so many insights from that environment about how people behave under pressure, what are the things that serve us well in those moments that bring teams together, how does leadership show up? And I've now tried to sort of teleport that into more of the real world, because the reality is not many of us will be lost or stranded in the bush.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, survival teaches us a lot about the human spirit. In all your years of extreme survival experience, what's one lesson that completely changed the way you see life and business?
Oh, great question, Tracy. So for me, a real standout moment, I often get asked who were the people that excelled, and is there a sort of generic type of person?
Right.
And it's funny because if you ask people to imagine that, they often think of the athletic type, somebody who's really inherently motivated and fit and
just a beast,
active and a bit of a beast. It's like out of their way, they're going to smash this.
Yeah.
But the person that actually shone the most was a 68-year-old Swedish grandmother.
Wow.
And she would do Tai Chi every day, and regardless of what we threw at the group to try and disrupt them, her attitude was they're just doing their job. That's what they're trying to unsettle us. Just enjoy where we are. Just be in the moment. And her quiet presence really galvanised the group around her. And one of the things that was really apparent in that was that she was completely undisruptible. It didn't matter what we did to her.
Yeah.
She stayed her throughout, and she probably crossed the finish line pretty much in exactly the same state that she started in, which was just incredible.
Wow. And would you say, and the reason I'm asking this is someone said this to me yesterday, that being calm is actually being in control. Would you say she's kind of mastered that in her years of being
Absolutely.
on Earth?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great quote, right?
Yeah.
Being calm is in control. I don't think that there's a circumstance that I can think of where losing your calm brings any value.
No.
So there's times where intensity is really important and we've got to act now and we've got to go quickly and be decisive and push hard, but we can do all of that and still be calm. And the minute we lose calm, decisions start to fray. We start to become too reactive. They're often the moments where we're driving home in the car going, oh, my best self didn't show up there today. I wish I'd said this or done that. So, calm is really a great ingredient in anything, I think.
Yeah, I find it's those moments where you just get consumed by emotion, and that's when you kind of, well, for myself, you kind of lose control and just get so, you go down a completely different path to what your mind told you should have gone.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, that's in all of us, right? We've got the fight or flight reaction, which is designed literally to shut our frontal cortex down, the part of us that thinks and reasons and does all of that amazing thinking and analysis and rationality that humans are capable of. But as soon as we're in that more reactive state, that at least in part gets shut down. If we're in a full-blown fight for your life scenario, it's completely blank. If we're in something like just a meeting like this can do it a little bit where it's like, oh, this is a bit intense.
Completely.
Yeah. And it's exactly like that. We come out the other end of it and as our calm, rational thinking self kicks back in, we go, oh, I could have done that. I could have said that. I wish I'd thought of.
Yeah.
So if we've got tactics to calm ourselves down in those moments of pressure, they're really useful things to have.
So what sort of tactics would you recommend?
So the most effective thing to do is breathe. And, that's been hacked around by just about everyone everywhere, but it's because it's true. So the only part of the fight or flight reaction that's within our conscious control is breathing. And interestingly, it's one of the first things that goes out the window as well. Yeah. So we either hold our breath or start to breathe more shallowly and rapidly.
Completely.
And if we can take calm and rhythmic breaths, so rhythm's the important thing. Slow, deep are good, but rhythm, even in and out, is the really important thing. It sends a really powerful physiological signal to our body that we're not under threat.
Yeah.
And it buys us just a little bit of time So that'd be step one and 3 breaths is enough.
I was going to ask because, I've heard 5 and then sometimes I get up to 2 and I stop counting.
Yeah. So 3 is enough to sort of send that signal. Then if we're able to acknowledge the emotional state, so as you said, the emotion's obviously really present in those moments of disruption for whatever reason, whether it's, we feel pressured or overwhelmed or someone's just told us something that was unexpected or something's happened. And if we can acknowledge how we feel about that, that straight away puts us in a more connected and present state. And then I find a useful third step is to just say, well, what's my intention here?
Yeah.
So if this conversation was about, say, a negotiation and we're trying to hammer out the details of a deal and you've pushed me a bit and I've reacted, if I can just remind myself, well, actually the intention here is to come to some sort of agreement, then I can get back to focus on that rather than kind of go down the rabbit hole of my reaction.
Yeah, so breathe deeply. The second one was?
Acknowledge how you feel.
Acknowledge how you feel and then remind yourself of your intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really useful because I find I just sometimes get so consumed by it. So really powerful.
And what I recommend to people is that we practice that when we're not under pressure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a great idea.
Because you have to be able to recognise it in the moment to make it useful, right? And often we get past and then go, that would have been a good time to do that.
Hindsight is a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mike, I thought what might be beneficial for our audience is if you could perhaps touch on how you work with your clients, just to give our conversation a bit more context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now my real focus, Tracy, is helping leaders deal with uncertainty and pressure. And I work with leaders from execs down to frontline, so, across quite a lot of depth in the organisations I work for.
Yeah.
The majority of my clients are from not-for-profit organisations, and that's partly because I've got a bit of history in that space as well. And I kind of like working for purpose, but, the range of clients is pretty diverse. It's not just not-for-profit.
Yeah.
So the work that we tend to do focuses around how do you lead well in a way that kind of leaves a legacy and helps your team to create its own sense of certainty, because I think, it's becoming more and more true that the environment around us is pretty uncertain.
Yeah.
Pretty much every time we wake up and switch on the news, there's another something where you go,
every day.
That's going to be, how will that play out? As we're recording this, the latest piece is tariffs from the US and some significant economic impacts playing out this morning in our stock markets and things like that. So more or less on a daily basis, we're faced with sets of circumstance that we have very little control over and where they could have a significant impact on our business. So it's helping teams to develop a sense of certainty that's internal to them and that isn't reliant on the circumstances they're in, so that they don't feel that same level of continuous assault when circumstances keep changing.
And that would be on the individual as well?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of work in terms of scale, everything from one-on-one coaching with leaders up to talking on conference stages in front of a couple of thousand people. So it's pretty diverse, and then programs that range from half days to multi-day, over a year or two, deep dives in organisations.
And Mike, I'd love to know, as business owners, we do carry a very different, I want to say, weight of stress.
Of course, yeah.
What would be, again, I'm going to go back to maybe your top 3 tactics for managing that stress, because like you say, every day is completely different.
Yeah.
There's things that get thrown at us left, right and centre, and it's not a life of comfort compared to someone that's employed. Remember those days?
Yeah.
What would your top 3 tips be there?
In terms of managing that at a personal level?
Yeah, in terms of managing at a personal level and perhaps if you've got one in terms of a team.
Yeah. Probably for both, I think having a clear sense of why you're doing what you're doing, so that whether you call that purpose or intention or the kind of mark you want to leave on the world, if that's clear, I think it helps a lot, because you can kind of remind yourself of why is this important. If we're in the middle of some really intense period where everything around us is uncertain, it's unclear where the next paycheck's coming from.
Yes.
Sometimes that's going as far as we're not even sure we're going to make payroll this month, all that kind of stuff. then reminding yourself why you're there, I think, is really useful. And we can do that at the level of individual. You know, if you've started a business, then you've clearly done that with some sort of an idea of, well, I think there's something positive I can put out into the world. Hopefully that's beyond just make money, which is clearly an intent.
Yeah.
But I think if you've kind of got a purpose that's beyond profit, then that really helps to anchor people. And we can do that at a team level as well. So what's our purpose as a team within our organisation, and how does that echo back into the broader purpose of the organisation? And then I think there's some really useful stuff to do around, you know, looping back to our Swedish grandmother. She was almost mantra-like with, you know, they're going to try and disrupt us, so don't worry about it. Just be here and be now. So I think there's a piece around, you know, if we're able to be present in the moment and think about what do I need to do tactically right now, but also how does this play out in the bigger, longer arc of business, that helps to take the pressure off. And the third thing I think is if you're able to focus outside yourself, that has a massive benefit. So, you know, often when I'm talking to people about public speaking, they go, well, that's terrifying.
Oh, my gosh, I hear
And
you.
it's terrifying because you're feeling like you're in the spotlight.
Exposed, yeah.
If you turn the spotlight onto the audience and say, what do these people need and what's the best I can give them in this bit of time, the focus, it doesn't disappear the pressure, and it shouldn't, but it does significantly shift how you experience it, because now it's service rather than I'm in the spotlight, what if I get this wrong?
So, Mike, you've guided so many people through pressure-filled moments, but let's flip the script. What's a time when you felt completely lost or overwhelmed, and how did you find your way back?
Great question. So one of the big ones, you've got copies of my two books
I know,
there.
thank you so much, yes.
The prologue of Unshakable is actually describing a period of my life where that was totally true. So I was I'd been away up north running a survival program. I'd landed in Perth. My wife and I had just got news that she had got a call back from a mammogram. And it's like, well, you don't get those things for everything's good, you know. No, so we knew there was bad news, you know. I had to fly to remote north central Queensland to deliver another workshop. And the flight back, so I had 5 flights to catch and about 12 hours of transit to get from this remote outback town back to Perth, and I was flying back to that. And I described that period, you know, it's very much something that Donna and I lived through together, and the impact on her was doubtless huge.
Yeah, I'm goosebumping.
That flight was probably, it's interesting, you know, spend the whole day in airports surrounded by people. I have never felt more isolated and alone than during that period. And both of us were like, well, we don't know the story yet, so let's not blow this up into something that it may end up not being.
Yeah.
And there's that very challenging balance when you're right on the verge of something that is so disruptive of, well, how do I rationally calm myself down, face this with that calm that we were talking about before, when it's so unknown and you know, you just don't know. The worst case is, well, you've got months to live.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you do? What did I do in that situation? What did we do together? The first bit is you have to find a way to get to acceptance as quickly as you can. And I say as quickly as you can because sometimes that road is long and hard.
Completely.
So it's not like, I haven't got any advice, but here's a way you can just flip the switch on that. And I think anyone that told you they did you should run a mile. It sounds like snake oil. So find acceptance as quickly as you can. And I think that's my experience of that in various times of genuine trial is that it's not linear.
No.
So you kind of go, okay, I accept it now, and then tomorrow I might be back in raging against the world, denial, wishing for something different.
Yeah.
Once you're at acceptance, then it's how do I get as quickly as possible into what are the elements of this I can control?
Yeah.
And for me, control is simultaneously liberating and terrifying because that bucket is actually quite small and that makes it liberating. It's terrifying because that bucket is quite small.
Yes.
But it's the best thing we can do, you know, if we can focus our attention on the stuff where we actually hold the levers and major on that, it helps to navigate the territory around us. And then the extreme other end of that is what's the stuff I need to pay attention to that I can't control. And in life and business, there's plenty of that. It's like, you know, we need to be watching what's happening globally. We need to be watching what's happening economically. We need to be watching trends in our market. So how do I watch that stuff in a way that it doesn't consume me, and how do I offload as much out of that bucket as I possibly can so that I'm paying attention to the 3 to 5 really important pieces and the rest I'm just kind of letting go through to the keeper.
Yeah.
That stuff's really simple to say. It's really simple to understand intellectually. Every time you face serious adversity, it's a journey. It's not just, you know, press the button and here we go.
I wish it was, but it's not.
Wouldn't it be lovely?
Be magic.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the things that really carried us through that, I'll come back to that intention again, we have we're up to 30 years in a few days.
Incredible.
And we have a very strong commitment to each other. We support each other in all kinds of thick and thin. We encourage each other to be the best people that we can be. And it's kind of like, okay, well, we just need to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And then we need to make decisions that get us the best possible outcome. So yeah, that's probably one of those that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So find acceptance, work on what you can control, keep an eye on the stuff that needs monitoring without doing your best not to let it overwhelm you. Yeah.
Mike, firstly, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate, your vulnerability. And secondly, 30 years, congratulations.
I know, it's amazing. I don't even look that old, do I, Tracy?
No, I thought you were 21. Like, what the heck? That's amazing because I think we live in a world where people, and I don't want to say tend to give up. There's always different circumstances as to why someone might, leave a relationship, leave a marriage. But I really think that's a true testament to your partnership that you have with Donna and that you encourage each other. You're always there for each other. And I think, if those key components aren't there, it's natural that a relationship would just fall apart anyway. So congratulations. I am so inspired by that. I think it's wonderful.
It's in many ways similar to a long-term business. There's, there's ebbs and flows. There's times where you're very much enthused and excited about the prospect and other times where it's like, what am I doing? Why?
Yes.
And times of tension and conflict and all of that stuff. And, the longevity happens because of commitment and partly it happens because of that ability to see past or through whatever the now is while being able to still be immersed in the now.
Yeah.
And, that's back to what we were talking about. Well, how do leaders deal with pressure? Same thing, right? How can I envisage what I see for the world and my business's part to play in that, how my team can bring that to pass. And, while facing, I may not make payroll this month, we sort of hold all of that paradoxically in the same time and space.
And I know during those, I want to say life-defining moments, like everything, the time just kind of freezes and you almost go numb. So I think for our listeners, definitely, I hope you're taking notes, to definitely, do some of those things because I know when I've been in those moments, you just go numb and you kind of get consumed by it.
Yeah.
And I will usually now I've obviously trained myself a bit better. I'll try snap out of it, go for a run, flip the switch in some way because I find otherwise you kind of just sit in it and it consumes you really badly.
Yeah. it feels a bit like you're talking about rumination there. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends on what it is.
Yes.
But I guess when you first hear that news, like when you heard the news about Donna, it's kind of like time freezes and your brain's trying to like process what exactly is happening. And then you kind of have to, to try not get stuck there. I found like kind of obviously have a moment, but then kind of do something to kind of snap you out of it a bit and then take those next steps. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's value in knowing what kinds of tools you have at your disposal for state change. Some really typical ones are exercise, time in nature.
Yes.
Doing some kind of activity that you find inherently absorbing. It's one of the reasons I love jiu-jitsu is when when you're on the mat, you cannot be anywhere else physically or mentally. It's all in. Otherwise you're getting choked.
That's a good thing. Yeah. I've grown to enjoy the same with running and exercise and you kind of, it's almost like a different kind of meditation. Your mind just kind of, I find it quite cathartic in that you, especially doing long distance runs, you've ran like 12 Ks out, you have to run the 12 pack. Yeah. Don't get an Uber, don't call your mom. Those thoughts cross my mind like Sunday. But it just really kind of helps you, I guess, like clear things out, I find, from a mental state point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, I'd love to know, is there anything that Mike House fears?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I actually get very uncomfortable in situations where I feel like I have zero control.
Right.
And for me, my default is if there's a problem, I just work a way through it. So I get active, I get focused, and it's like, right, find a solution. For me, and the story I just told, I guess part of the challenge of that is, well, there may not be one, and if there is, it's probably not up to me to enact it.
Yes, yeah.
Thank goodness, thank goodness for surgeons. So there's that for me is probably, I don't know if fear is quite the right word, but it's where I get the most challenged. I think on the whole, my experience is that fear is it's mostly about I don't have enough information and I tend to lean into things and I'm naturally curious and try to expose myself to a lot of intentional, novel situations and I guess pressures to kind of see how I respond and behave. But yeah, that feeling of there is actually no lever I can put my hand to is probably the place where I am least good. Not very good at accepting that.
Yeah.
We talked about acceptance. If I'm in that situation, I don't want to accept it. I want something to do now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's really great that you've mentioned that because I think so many business owners in particular, if we start to lose that, sense of control, we don't feel like we've got some sort of grips, because it's quite scary.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's why we tend to don't like that feeling. In some ways it's kind of good though, because it does teach us, various things. But I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
And there's a bit of a paradoxical distinction for me in this too, Tracy, in that it's fairly easy to come across as, well, Mike House is just a control freak then, and I'm really not. I'm quite happy to let things just play out and unfold while finding the pieces of that I should be in control of. And there are some circumstances where it's like, well, this is just going to happen to you, so you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Actually, probably fear big crowds of humans in confined spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a fan?
No. Like things like concerts, sporting events.
Yeah, I see them like a mosh pit.
It's kind of like, nah, because I know how crazy we can be en masse when something happens.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm paranoid about things happening, but it's just I often look around and go, wow, if something went on here, these people are going to start doing crazy stuff and that's not going to end well.
No, and especially if there's like alcohol involved and everyone just, and there's a raucous band and everyone just goes buck wild. So, Mike, would it be okay to ask how things went with Donna?
Yeah, of
It's all
course.
good? Yeah, you don't mind?
So super good news for us,
great.
which is such a blessing, and I really want to acknowledge that that's not always how the story ends, and some of your listeners will be in the middle of exactly that journey, and for some that won't end well. So for Donna, fortunately, that was a really good story. It was caught at a great time, surgery and a little bit of radiotherapy, and 10-year anniversary is coming up pretty soon.
Wow.
And she's travelling really well. So
I'm so glad.
it was. It's nice to be able to say that on the other side of that moment and then series of moments. Yeah.
Do you find like that sort of moment really makes you appreciate life more and kind of puts things into perspective?
Yeah, of course it does.
And do you feel like that feeling lasts, or do you feel like the human mind kind of just forgets again? Or I guess something so profound as that.
I reckon you have to remind yourself.
Yeah.
So there's an element of life which is mundane, and it's really easy to just get up and do Groundhog Day again.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's really easy to settle into comfortable routines at an individual, couple, team, business level where we're just, what are we doing? We're doing the same thing we did last year. And there's an element of human success, I think, that relies on that, where we can go, okay, there's some stuff we've banked here that we can just rinse and repeat and we know it works. The challenge of that is that we can get stale, tired, we can lose sight of that bigger picture stuff. And so there's got to be ways to have to work on ways to keep things fresh.
Yeah.
Or to remind you of what's important. And I don't know, in my experience, that's a bit of an ebb and flow thing.
Yes.
There's times and places where I go, yeah, we've kind of forgotten that. And a bit like going for a run to change your status. Okay, what are the things that bring us back to that kind of state where this moment right now is actually the best thing we've got? Useful to have those things brought back to awareness, I think.
Yeah, definitely. My dad had a liver transplant the end of last year from taking Lipitor for high cholesterol for too many years, and they've now realised it makes the liver fatty. And life's changed in like a blitz. He went on the list. He got a call by God's good grace 2 weeks later, and he got a liver. And for me, it really made me realise that, life can just change in an instant. Yeah. And if you are plodding along, stop plodding and just grab life, balls, by the balls, and just like make the most of it, because you never know when someone might not be there or, and even like the person whose liver my dad got, I was like, man, it's so like, it's a blessing for us, but it's a loss for them. It was such a like, such an awakening moment, because again, we just take things for granted and, complain about the smallest, most pathetic things when we don't actually realize how blessed we are. So, Mike, I'd love to know, 12 days alone in the Pilbara with just 2 litres of water. What did that experience strip away from you, and what did it give you that you still carry with you today?
Oh, wonderful question. What did it strip away? So I think that experience was probably the closest. I do quite a bit of meditation, and I think that was the closest I've come to just genuinely being 100% no monkey mind, present in the moment. So there was a time on about day 7 where, early on you kind of really focused on logistics and where am I, how am I getting, water, blah, 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 blah. The busyness of actually arriving at the start line and getting underway, and the sort of letting go of all the stuff you've left behind, the to-do list and all of that. I didn't make a noise out loud for 8 days. On the 8th day, I was calling a friend just to say I'm at this location and everything's going to plan, and that was the extent of the call. About day 7, I became aware that I was looking at the landscape, and I wasn't actually thinking about the landscape at all. So of course, as soon as you become aware of that moment's broken. But Normally you go, oh, what a lovely hill or what a beautiful sunset or look at that bird. There was none of that chatter at all. It was just like I'm in the environment, I'm looking at it, I'm absorbing it, but there is no conversation internally about the environment. It's such a peaceful state to be in. And I've been able to recapture that to some degree in meditation and other places. Not quite to the same level, but for moments that's been more accessible. And one of the things that's sort of been enduring, I guess, is for me the value of that experience of going out with pretty much nothing is it makes obvious the line between need and want. You can live actually pretty comfortably for 12 days with stuff you're carrying in your pockets. Yeah. And so you go, well, most of the stuff that I describe as a need is actually just a want, really. I don't need it. If I've got water and shelter and food, I'm good pretty much. Yeah. So it resets that and gives me an ability ongoing to be able to look at the things around me and say, okay, so why do I want to hang on to that? Why is it important? And what would be the cost or the benefit of letting it go? And a bit like we were talking with relationships before, sometimes I do that really actively and sometimes I forget for big chunks of time, but that's probably one of the enduring pieces that came out of it. Yeah.
And your meditation practice, how long have you done that for, Mike?
So I'm not a very disciplined person.
That's okay.
So I have been doing various forms of meditation for probably close to 30 years, maybe a bit more, 35. Yeah. And in various forms, things like you were talking about, go for a run, sit in nature, long walk, survival trip, but also, sitting in stillness and in various contexts and just kind of focusing on breath or some other focal point. Yoga, a bit of that. A bit like you, I would describe, despite the fact jiu-jitsu is really intense, I would actually describe that as a form of meditation. It's very in your body and very aware of yourself in three-dimensional space and maintaining a sense of calm. So it's been 30-something years and a bit of a variety of practice and various levels of, whacking out a decent daily streak and then not doing anything for months at a time and then revisiting.
You've obviously seen the benefits, though, of doing it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. At one level, I kind of wish I had the discipline to just do it every day.
Yeah, same.
Because there's no doubt that I'm calmer, I'm more focused, I'm clearer about what I need and want. I'm more certain of who I am in the world and how I want to bring myself to bear in it.
Yeah.
And it's also really easy to go, well, I'm busy. I'm just going to get on with this over here.
Yes, or just jump on social media or
it's
something like that.
Do-be balance, yeah.
Yeah, I found since I've introduced yoga into my, exercise routine, and so Monday nights usually yoga and sauna, it's actually strengthened my running and my weights as well. Yeah. So it definitely goes to show that there's great benefit.
Yeah.
And then I have tried to meditate every day. I'm work in progress. But
yeah, same.
Mike, I'd love to know what inspired you to write your books. So we've got Thrive and Adapt, No Matter What, and Unshakable, More Than Resilience.
Yeah. So book one, which is Thrive and Adapt, was really I was living that double life, survival skills instructor and change agent in a large not-for-profit. And both of those were part-time roles. So I'd head to the bush for 3 weeks, come back, and I realised that just saw in real clarity what we all know, that there's a line between circumstance and response, and response is only loosely coupled to circumstance. And so I got very curious about what sits on the line. Why is it that some people will see opportunity where someone else sees disaster? Why is it that some someone will survive against the odds when someone else dies when they shouldn't? Why is it that someone manages to get up and keep going where the people around them will quit? You know, it's like what is it that sits on the line? And I think it comes down to three things. How we see the circumstances we're in, whether or not we can shift that perception if it's not serving us. Talk a lot about effective or ineffective versus right or wrong. It's like, well, actually, who cares whether it's true or not? Is it serving you?
Yeah, definitely.
And then the third thing, what are the things that you do to set yourself up for success? And those three things kind of cross-reference and fuel each other. Working between those two environments. So in the change environment, it's all about how do we create alignment, certainty, clarity, survival world. How do I create disruption, uncertainty, argument, challenge? And I realised that the levers were actually the same levers. It's just push versus pull. So Thrive and Adapt is really a collection of those insights and tactical tools people can use to deal with pressure and hopefully show up as their best self. There's a bit of leadership stuff in there too, but mostly it's individually focused. The Unshakable book I wrote just as COVID was wreaking havoc on the world.
Yeah.
And it's really about, okay, so if you're a leader, how do you create that sense of certainty for a team when there is none around you? You know, you can't look to the environment for it. So that's more, there's some individual stuff in there, but mostly it's focused around, you know, how do you lead and how do you do team in a disrupted world.
And was there ever a time where you thought you would never be an author? Was this something you sort of had always in mind, or?
I've kind of had the notion of writing for a long time, and I've got the seeds of a potential third book bumping around at the moment.
Great.
It took a lot longer to do Thrive and Adapt than Unshakable because I didn't kind of understand how I worked in that way.
Sure.
Knocking the second one out was a fair bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it was the idea of having like your first book maybe, or?
Not particularly. It was more about, like any other medium, there's a set of skills and a set of constraints and opportunities that go with a book. A bit like this environment, you know, you've got there's boundaries around it that make some opportunities really viable in a podcast and other things, well, it's just you can't do it.
No.
So books are a bit the same.
Yeah.
It took me a while to understand that it was actually a one-to-one conversation. You know, an author is writing to whoever the reader is in this moment, and it took a while to get to that. It's not about talking to many, many people. It's actually a conversation with one.
With that person, yeah.
And it took a while to understand that it's got to be cohesive as a entity on its own. It's got to have that sort of classic beginning, middle and end to be a book. So, yeah, once I kind of worked that stuff out, it became a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the copies. I'm really looking forward to reading them.
Yeah, enjoy. I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, 100%. Mike, your concept of guerrilla mindfulness intrigues many. Can you elaborate on what it entails and how it benefits leaders and teams in high pressure environments?
Yeah, great. So we actually talked about that before. Guerrilla
I thought we might have, yeah.
So guerrilla as in freedom fighter, not big black ape. And the reason I called it that was that guerrillas are typically outgunned and outclassed in every way, and so they need really sort of quick and dirty tactics that will work in moments of huge pressure and that have a unreasonable return on investment. And so it's those three steps: the breathing, acknowledge how you feel, state your intent, is basically the little package I put together that I call guerrilla mindfulness. And it's the intent is you can actually use that in a moment of pressure, unlike meditation. You know, if we were sitting here and suddenly felt pressure for whatever reason, it's not like you can go, I just press pause, Tracy. I want to go and meditate for half an hour and then I'll get back to you.
I'll join you.
Whereas we can do 3 breaths while I'm hearing a question and go, how do I feel? Okay, what's my intent? And just crack on with what we're doing. So, yeah, that's the tactic.
Yeah, I follow, it's Jefferson. Oh, he's a lawyer on Instagram, and he said your first breath is always like your first word. And I was like, that's so powerful, because naturally, maybe it's just me, you want to go straight into like 101 words. But he was like, always remember your first breath is your first word, and then you can kind of, go from there. So I thought that was quite powerful, I found.
Nice.
Mike, growing up on a farm in the southwest of WA, often exploring with your father and, I hope I'm going to say this right, Noongar people, how did these early experiences shape your understanding of adaptability and survival?
Yeah, great question. So Dad was a very curious human, and he was always looking for the potential connections between things, and he had a view that that a good farmer left the place that he farmed in a better state than when it came into his hands.
Yeah, I love that.
And so he was very much about not only how do I grow really good crops and sheep and things like that, but how do I actually enhance the environment that is the farm and the environment around it. And really early on, back in the 80s, won some environmental awards before that was even a thing, and certainly farmers weren't thinking that much about it. So I kind of learnt from him a level of observation and curiosity about how do things fit together, and how do we make an impact on that for good or otherwise. And from the opportunity to spend some time in the bush with traditional owners, which, back then I was so young that I didn't even know that was an opportunity. I look back on it now and go, wow, what more would I do with that opportunity now? That culture is so fantastic in terms of longevity and connection with country and sustainability, and surely has had to adapt many, many, many times over the period of time that the culture has been together. So while it doesn't directly inform adaptability, there's so much stuff in the natural world that's adapting all the time. Life gets dry, so a tree drops a branch. Our native marsupials in Australia have the capacity to hold dormant pregnancies, for potentially a couple of years, waiting for the rain. And you go, wow, how well adapted is that to a dry country, where rain is, it's not as reliable as seasonal. It might be big patches of dry before the next weather. And I think there's a lot we can learn from the natural ebbs and flows of life. There's periods of great generation and growth, and other periods of relative decay and even death and renewal. So what does that look like? And, there's all kinds of cycles of that, I think, in life. And for me, life and business really. And for me, part of that's about, I'm just aware that whatever my impact is, it's seasonal, at the minimum, it's seasonal, because at some point I won't be here anymore. Yeah. I'll be on to whatever the next adventure is. And hopefully some of the stuff I leave around has some value beyond my moment of passing. But, in a more short time frame, there's all kinds of cycles that go on where you go, I'm actually a little bit bored now, so how do I re-inject some energy into this? Or where's my learning and growing edge, and how can that contribute beyond myself and into my intimate relationships and broader ones?
I really love how you've summarised that, because I found last year was quite a turbulent year for me. And, you always think when you're in that moment, you think, oh my gosh, is it ever going to pass? But the way you've described it as different seasons in your life, and I do find some years seem more challenging than others. I was like, there must be a hole in the universe last year for me. Well, I've seriously pissed someone off upstairs. But it feels like it's on the up and now, thank goodness. But it's great that you've described it as, different seasons, which also means that it's it's temporary. It's not going to always be that way. Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think that's very true, Tracy, that adversity, I think there's two observations that are helpful. One is that if you haven't experienced adversity, your time will come. There's no doubt. No one gets out of the box without scars. life is like that. And whether that's personal, whether it's business, whether it's all of the above, whether it's health or relational, we're going to cop some knocks over the arc of a lifetime.
Or a punch in the face.
Yeah, and that's true. That's true for business as well, right?
Yeah.
There will be seasons where we're super successful and other times where it's like, why am I even doing this? It seems like I'm really struggling and not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So just acknowledging that is possible is a bit liberating, and then it kind of helps us to go, well, okay, so what can I do with this set of circumstances I'm in right now? And then for me, that Stoic philosophy of memento mori, remember you'll die, is super useful because it says, well, it's not permanent. Make the most of this moment. You're not better than anyone else, but you're pretty good. You're unique. Do the best you can do with the hand you've been dealt, but kind of don't get beyond yourself because you're still mortal. That's a really useful thought to remind myself of, anyway.
Yeah, no, it is powerful. It's I always find that even when you're going through those hard times, you come out on the other side, and then it's almost like you develop another sense because you can somewhat see it in other people, or you can kind of support and hold space for someone who might be going through the same thing. So whilst it totally sucks, there always is a lesson or a benefit I find on the other side. So, yeah.
You learn and you grow and you stretch, and that's precious.
Yeah, and I find not getting too, I guess, fixated on what your ideals were or how things should be and kind of just going with it as well really helped.
Yeah. Yeah, that's back to that acceptance piece,
very
isn't
powerful,
it?
Very powerful. Mike, would I be right in saying that your dad was one of the most influential people in your life?
Yeah, definitely.
Has there been others?
Yeah, he certainly was, and there've been a few. So mum and dad both.
Great.
And they were an interesting sort of paradox in some ways. Dad was in many ways a really black and white thinker, but deeply curious. Mum is one of the best hosts I've ever met.
Oh, nice.
So our household was a really open environment where lots of people from a big range of societal standing came through our doors, and they were all treated just as another human being.
Yeah.
And mum's also pretty curious as well. My grandmother on both sides were pretty wild adventurers that I reckon in a different era they would have done some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
They were rather constrained by being women in the era that they grew up in. And partly because of that, were really encouraging of exploration and getting after stuff.
Yeah, great.
And then in business, I've had a couple of really significant mentors that at various times have just been present with a steadying hand or a piece of guidance.
So powerful.
Super powerful, yeah. And some of those have been very passing moments that they're probably not even aware of that have had an enduring impact that's been positive. So.
I actually love that you've brought that up, Mike, because I'm a big advocate for mentoring, coaching. I think all humans, whether you're a business owner or not, you need some sort of mentor by your side.
Yep.
And I hear a lot of people think, or say that it's a load of nonsense, it's not necessary. What would your response to that be?
I would say that's a load of nonsense, Tracy.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's formal or informal, human beings are designed to be in collective. We're not individual animals. We're herd animals, and we haven't said anything in this conversation about where you grew up and your influences and all of that, but we sit here across the table from each other, and there's lots of overlap between what we do and say and think, but it's also very true that you are 100% unique, as am I.
Yeah.
And that's a product of where you grew up and your influences and education and experiences and all of that. So if we're open to it, we can learn a heck of a lot from any other human being just because they see the world differently to us. And I reckon that's probably one of the edges that currently is not particularly well done in the world, but we could really lean into and if we could genuinely get hold of that diversity and bring it to bear in some real ways, that would be incredible. You know?
Would be.
And that's what a team's about, right? And so, okay, we've got a group of individuals with different technical skills and different experience of the world, and if we can genuinely make the most of that, that's powerful. And so, coaching, mentoring at a formal and informal level has a way of accelerating insight, knowledge, practical application of stuff it's not impossible on your own, but, man, you go a lot slower.
Oh, so slow, yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely does help, speed up things and also from a personal growth point of view. Because I think something I underestimated when I started my business, you have this passion, you've gone to art school, in my case, and I think I underestimated just how much, how I function as a human. It sounds really basic, but how much my business would depend on that. I kind of I have this skill set. I'm doing graphic design and branding, and that's what I do. But there's all these other layers that I completely underestimated. And through working, with a business coach and advisor, that's really helped, unveil all those things. And I think it's made me a bit more well-rounded in some regard as well.
Sounds perfect. That's kind of what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. I couldn't function without my advisors, so it's been a real game changer. And it's also nice to know when things are going well, there's someone celebrates with you, or if shit hits the fan, someone's there for you as well. Because again, if you're on your own, you can almost drive yourself stark raving mad trying to figure it out. So
absolutely, and you can get too invested in your own Kool-Aid too. So it's kind of you get yourself out of your own echo chamber. And for me, there's a really obvious parallel in that conversation. So, when I used to do triathlon years ago and I got a swimming coach, so I learned to swim in the farm dam. So
you're brave.
Swimming was a pretty loose term. My swim coach halved my swim time in the first week that I worked with him. And I kind of go, I could have swum for my entire life and never, and it wasn't ever stunning. It just got me out of the pool in a shape that meant I could do a ride. But that's true of other parts of life as well. We can get coaching, mentoring, advice financially, investment wise, tactics, strategy wise, where someone has a set of insights that we don't have. And it's an opportunity just to insert a chip from someone else that gives you a X times result that if you tried to uncover it on your own, you'd be there forever.
Oh, you would.
And you may never get there.
No, that's very true.
So someone's already invented the wheel. We might as well use it.
And make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm so glad you shared that. Mike, we often hear about resilience, but what about vulnerability? Can you share a time when being vulnerable changed the outcome of a situation for you?
I kind of think to me, they go hand in hand. It's because so much of resilience is about acceptance, that acceptance is a really vulnerable state. And for me, particularly in the facilitation work that I do, you go in with a plan, whatever the conversation is that you're facilitating, you go in with a plan, and the amount of times that I've screwed a plan up and thrown it over my shoulder within a handful of minutes of getting there, because it's like that plan's not going to serve this room, these people now. And you could follow the plan and you would get an outcome, but it's way better to go, well, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most extreme versions of that I had way back. I was a youth worker and I'd set up this thing that I thought was going to be quite a fun way to explore the territory that this group of young people was together to explore. And we were playing a game with a whole stack of balls, and it was sort of a group juggling exercise. And this buff young fella, is really quite aggressive, very strong, and he's got this big handful of balls and he's literally thrown them at the ground at my feet, right in my face, and he's gone, "This is fucked, bloke." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I'm going, "Well, what do we do now?" And I just went, "Okay, well, sit down. What would be better? Here's where we are. This is where we've got to get to." I thought this would be fun. Clearly I've misread that. So what would be a better way to do it? And as a group, we put together a process that got us further and faster than anything I could have done in that moment. To me, that's more resilient than unshakable. You notice the uns in brackets, right?
I saw, yes. I will actually, I'm sure that on the video there.
Because we are all disruptible. So it's that moment of, well, if I try to fortify myself and not bend, I'm going to break. That's the opposite of resilience. One of my friends described it as, well, it's a bit like the difference between a cheetah and an insect. You know, an insect's hard exoskeleton.
Yes.
It'll handle all sorts of pressure up to a point and then it just crushes in a big bang.
Yeah.
Whereas a cheetah's got loads of flexibility and is able to bend and go round corners and up and down and over things and get great speed as a result. So vulnerability is partly about, well, first of all, being honest with yourself. Where am I at? What does that mean? Accepting where we're at. And then being able to actually go, okay, given all that, can I throw the plan over my shoulder and go with whatever emerges in a way that's useful?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a more useful skill than having all the answers.
Yeah, 100%. And Mike, how do you feel business has changed you?
Wow, great question. So it's given me a stack of mental freedom that I've been able to do things in ways that I would love to have done in some of the businesses that I worked in as an employee.
Yeah.
But where there just wasn't the will or the capacity to do that. I'm, I think, more purposeful. When I started my business, there was a bit of a sense that, you know, I'd lived whatever that was at that point, 40 odd years of life up to that moment to prepare myself to do that and to do my business work, and that work was probably what I'm put on the planet to do. Yeah. So there's a really strong sense of mission in that. It's meant I'm a solo operator, so business is kind of a loose term. I'm more of a practitioner than a business owner. There's me and a part-time assistant that run my little kingdom.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of freedom and flexibility in that. So there's times and places where, you know, like yesterday I sat down for a couple of hours and had a yarn with a mate who's over from New Zealand, and we were talking business and life and throwing ideas around. That would be really hard to do if I wasn't the owner of the enterprise and my own boss. Hard to justify that kind of time in a conventional working sense.
Sure.
And it forces you to grow, I think. So for me, particularly given what I do, you know, I position myself as an expert in my space.
Yeah.
I've written books about it. I stand on conference stages talking about it, that sort of thing. So it forces me to really deeply examine what I think and how I think, and to the benchmark of, well, do other people find that valuable is a fantastic way of provoking growth, because there's been great ideas where in my head it's like, this is awesome, and you take it out to market and the market goes,
yes.
You go, oh, okay, so that's not a thing, or if it is, then I've got to adapt what it looks like. So that kind of evolution of thinking and product development requires personal growth, which you know, it's not that you don't get that as an employee, but there's a different reality behind it when you're a business owner. Yeah.
Mike, if you could go back to 30 years ago before you married your beautiful wife, Donna, what is one piece of advice you'd give yourself, and potentially why would you give yourself that advice?
Oh, wow. Be less hesitant. Yeah. Get after it. I reckon it took me a long time. And, you know, back to mentors, it took me a long time to believe in myself to the degree that I do now. And, I don't know how you fast track that, and even if it's possible to. But I think back then I could have acted more boldly. One of the things I'm really noticing as I get older is I'm becoming more and more courageous to just say what I think needs to be said.
Love that.
And I'm noticing as I do that the profound impact that has on people. Just to get straight to the heart of something and not beat around it. Whereas when I was, going back 30 years plus, I was very cautious around that. And I think for me there's that paradox of, I can often say things that are actually pretty hard for people to hear.
Yeah.
But do that with deep empathy as well. So it's not about being unkind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I reckon I would have switched some of that on earlier had I known the impact of it. If I could go back 30 years, could I do that? Who knows?
Yeah. When you say impact, is it the way that answer is received? Like, is it obviously has impact on that person? Is that what you mean? Or
impact in the sense of I think people are able to when I speak into a space with that kind of courage, and I reckon there's two main ways that I do that. So one is encouraging people a lot more than I used to.
Yeah.
So if I see someone doing a great job, big or small, I will very regularly these days go, hey, you're doing a great job. And here's what I notice about that.
Yeah.
And you can see, I was doing that with the CEO yesterday, where it's just like you and your organisation in your space are doing some amazing stuff that's genuinely different. And I know that to do that and to hold that position is costing you both financially and in pressure terms in the market that you're in right now. But it's really noticeable and your commitment's tangible, keep it up. And you could see her just going, oh, wow, thanks.
Yeah.
You could see the spine stiffening and the resolve growing, and it's like, we got to keep on that. And then the other side is just saying, hey, we were talking mentoring before and the way mentors can provoke growth. If I see something where it's like, hey, you could make a 2-degree course change and it would change your world, I'll just call that now.
Yeah.
Whereas before I'd kind of trying to kind of massage you around to that realisation.
Yeah.
Now I'll just go, hey, that's not working for you. If I know something that does work, I'll go, are you happy for me to offer you a suggestion? And I'll just give it to them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just get really vigorously after helping them to unearth it. So, that means there are some conversations that might have taken hours or days that are now 5-minute conversations with the same impact. Yeah.
I also think you've highlighted something else, is the power of a compliment. I don't think we do it enough for each other. I'm not saying, give compliments all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, when I did the first podcast in the city, I had a mic, and this guy was like, excuse me, miss. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope this guy doesn't freaking rob me. Like, I was just like straight into that panic mode. He looked a little bit dodgy and he's like, you look fabulous today. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice. Yeah, I thought you were going to rob me. So, but I was like on a high. It was the first time we were doing the podcast in the studio. And I was like, wow, that's just, naturally we just assume the worst.
Yes.
But it just lifted my spirit for the entire day. So it's really so powerful to just stop and say, hey, you know what, you look great, or whatever the case may be. So,
yeah. And for me, I often say in sessions that the key to that is, we don't want to be doing sort of hashtag Insta-worthy, I'm so grateful,
hashtag fabulous,
rose-coloured glasses, BS kind of stuff. Because, sometimes we're doing that in the face of significant adversity. That CEO is a good example. There are some real costs to holding the positions they're holding. It is not easy. There are elements of what they're doing right now that are substantially challenging their existence potentially.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is powerful and important work. So it's kind of like you've got to hold gratitude, thankfulness, acknowledging people's efforts, complimenting stuff, thanking people, all of that is super important, but it's got to be genuine.
It does.
And it's not a case of trying to paint over stuff that's hard.
No.
It's got to stand, it's paradoxical, but it's got to stand alongside of actually this is also potentially a tough reality.
Yeah. Mike, I feel like we could chat for days. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
I don't think so. I feel like this has been a really interesting and wide-ranging conversation.
I've loved it. Thank you.
And, I'd just encourage people to lean into whatever their next step of growth is. I think there's such value in finding those edges of challenge, whatever that looks like for us individually or teams if you're a leader. Get after that stuff with a bit of courage. It's valuable and I think the world needs it.
Yeah.
You and I and everybody being the best versions of ourselves that we can be genuinely makes a difference to the world that we're in. And thanks heaps for the work that you're doing here. I think podcasts are a wonderful medium right now, and bringing some of the minds that you're bringing to the table and taking out to the public is a really great service, I think, to the business community in Perth. And, get after Rogan.
Hell yeah, watch out. I'm coming for you.
I'd like to see that.
I'll take it on. I've got European blood, so I'm all for it. But no, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for making time for us today. And I am so glad that I managed to have a one-to-one conversation with you because, like I say, when I saw you at that event, I saw the comments on absolute FOMO. So thank you so much. Where is the best place for our audience to go should they wish to connect with you?
So my website's a good spot, which is just mikehouse.com.au. House like building you live in. And I'm also on LinkedIn as The Mike House because there's a few Mike Houses there. So if you go LinkedIn, The Mike House, you'll find me, and all my contact details are in both those places. Happy to have conversations with anybody about anything.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We'll definitely pop the links in the show notes. Mike, thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you.